when horses are very talented, then they can do a lot of things out of sheer talent without understanding what they're doing, without progressive development of the body, and then they break down mentally or physically or both. Because they get pushed, the rider thinks, oh, we can do this, let's do the next thing, and they never bother to explain anything to the horse. They just ride on the talent, or they exploit the talent. And Colin Quirker actually had a thing on his website a long time ago where he said we should spend less time demanding and more time explaining to the horse. The old mindset was always demand this and demand that and make the horse do this and the horse has to obey. And but McCorker always talked about explaining something to the horse. He was my first teacher who talked about explaining. Explain the aids, explain what a leg aid means, explain what a whip aid means, explain the half wall to the horse. He was very big on that, and he was the most systematic teacher we've ever had. My other teachers were intuitive, and they were brilliant in many ways, but they didn't have that intellectual or academic system of writing and training that McCorker had. So there were always pieces missing, in other words. There were always gaps. And for McCorker, everything you do had a certain slot in the system, and every systematic box had a thing you could put in there or take out of. Like, if you run into this situation, then there's an app for that, right? There is this exercise you can do, or then there is this you can do. That there's endless. That it never ran out. Yeah, there was always, oh yeah, when this happens, you do this exercise, or you explain it to the horse like this, you build it like that. It was totally logical. It was, you were never lost. You always had this very, very clear structure. So, the horse never got lost. The horse knew what's expected and what to do and how to do it, and and what we wanted and what everything meant. The horses were never surprised in that sense. They always knew what every request was, what every aid meant, and they knew how to handle their body, their balance. That's the simplicity, right? Strip all the, I don't know, embellishments and fancy additions away and focus on the bare bones. And the horse will figure it out, right? You make it simple enough. One foot in front of the other, here is the line, left legs on this side, right legs on this side, become a part of that arc in your body. Then with a relatively simple exercise, you can make a big transformation in the horse. Because then they learn body awareness, they learn where their feet are, they know how they need to balance themselves so they can stay on this line without falling over, without drifting, out and so on. And then once they figure that out, then you can take that balance and everything and ride a shoulder, ride a half mask and so on. But as long as they can't do this regular vault, with the same number of strides in every quarter and so on, then they won't be able to do more difficult stuff either, because then they lose the overview over their body completely. So that's one of those things. Back to super simple. Let the horse find out how many legs they have, where they are, how they need to balance themselves so they don't fall down. And then take that and apply it to something more advanced and more sophisticated. And then you go back and forth. Explaining things to the horse is, I think, generally not done enough. People don't think of it enough, or they don't think of it in those terms, and it's not usually part of regular teaching. People assume horses know what a leg aid means or what a half wall is or whatever.
So again, it's fine.
Yeah, and then when you do something and it's not working, and you tweak your seat and your aids, and it's still not working. The reason could be that the horse just doesn't understand the aids, that the horse has never been taught how he's supposed to respond to the lower leg, to the knee, to the thigh, to the half wall, to your weight, pelvic rotation, and so on. So then sometimes you have to go way back and start there and teach the horse. Or maybe the horse never learned how many legs it has, or where the legs are, or how to move the weight from one side to the other, from one corner of the body to another. Then you may have to start on the ground. was just moving the horse around a little bit, like without more soul to him. So sometimes, I mean, I've often been surprised at how far I had to go down, not just to ground zero, but like minus, below ground, and then start somewhere subterranean and then work my way up.
We always say in educating children that you have to start where the student is, where the child is. And it's the same with the horse. You have to start where they are, which means you have to find where they are. And you can't assume they know things they don't know. And you have to ask questions and truly openly observe the results, the responses from the horse, so that you can get an accurate assessment.
And of course, most people don't start their own horses. So they buy a horse, or maybe they rent a horse in a riding school or whatever. So they assume, well, the horse has been trained. He's under saddle, so I'm sure he knows these things. But that's another thing you shouldn't assume. You should never assume that the horse has really learned anything of value in training, even professional training. But you have to double check. You have to see, well, what does he really know? What does he really understand? And then there are often appalling gaps in the knowledge base. And then you have to fill them. You have to go back, basically, sometimes to square one and restart the horse and catch him up. Right? Well, if I touch you like this, I would like you to react like that.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean this and doesn't mean that. It means this.
Mm.
Just being extremely explicitly clear to the horse.
So with new horses, you spend a lot of time just finding out where's the horse, what does he know, and how does he tick, how does he think, how does he feel, all these things, getting to know the horse, and that takes a long time. It takes much, much longer than people realize. It can take months to really figure each other out and understand the horse, and then life to become a team. Because people think, well, it's like a bicycle, right? You hop on and off you go, right? And I used to think that when I was young, I thought, it's a horse is a horse, and it's just, you don't want to rely,
Just tell it to do things and just stuff. Right?
But the older I got, the longer it took me to figure horses out and understand them. But take more time, so it's very like the more experience you get, the more you see the complexities, and the more in depth you look, and the more you look at everything from different angles and so on.